Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to Watercolor Week, or welcome back to Watercolor Week. Yesterday I started things off with a fun color swatching and testing of some new watercolors. So if you want to check that out, look for the link. I think it's in that corner. It'll come down and you can click over to that video. So for today's video, I thought I would try giving myself a challenge. And I mentioned I would give myself a challenge in last week's video. So here I am. This is the challenge. I'm going to be painting or watercoloring with only one color. We're going to see what happens, kind of exploring the different contrasts you can get by using a more saturated color versus something that's more tinted or pale. I'm going to experiment with that a little bit. So let's get going. I've decided to use Mama Elephant's Animal Parade stamp set for this card. I thought the different images would be really fun to paint. I was specifically looking for a stamp set that had a lot of open images to paint because I want to challenge myself to really explore the different shades of one color. So I'm using some Arches cold press watercolor paper, and I'm stamping the images in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. This particular ink is very, very stark black. That's what I love when I'm doing black stamping. And it's also waterproof. So this is going to be great for painting over the top. It's not going to smear or smudge or bleed once I start adding my watercolor paint on top. And because this watercolor paper has a little bit of texture to it, I wanted to stamp it twice in a row to make sure that those stamped lines really penetrate the paper. Sometimes the texture will prevent the images from stamping completely, so it's always best to stamp them a couple times. And I did the same thing with this greeting from the stamp set. You have a few different greeting options in the stamp set. I chose the one that says happy birthday, and I did end up stamping it twice because one time was enough, but I did stamp it twice eventually. So I'm going to be using the watercolor paints that I showed you in yesterday's video, and I've chosen the color C33. I thought that would be a nice deep blue, and that I would have some good opportunity for the background and also getting some deep colors kind of in the shaded areas of each of these images. So as I color these, I'm going to start, well, this first one I'm starting with the dark, and then I'm going to kind of work kind of lighter to that. But then I realized that a better method was actually to start with kind of a medium shade and let that dry and then come in with the darker shades to add shading. I'm not sure why this first time I went straight to the darkest color. I'm not sure why I did, but I did figure out with the fox and also the other two little characters that it was easier to paint them if I started with kind of a lighter tone and then it added the darker shades on top. That penguin kills me. It's so cute. Anyway, so I'm adding these kind of lighter shades in. I'm thinking about where the shadow will be. I decided to have the light coming from the right side of the scene. So the back side of these animals will be in shadow. So I'm kind of painting with that light in mind, and I'm making sure that I add the darkest shades on the back side of the animals. It's interesting, as I was painting this, I thought it would be a lot more difficult than it actually was. I think I found it almost a little bit easier because I didn't have to worry about changing colors and deciding which colors to use and which colors would be best, in shadow and, things like that. I found the restriction of only one color, it was a challenge because I had to think about how I was going to use it, and yet it was also a little bit easier, if that makes sense. I think it would be interesting to take this challenge one step further and possibly paint your entire scene in black and white, just using a black paint or even just a dark brown. And then once everything's dry, go back over each of the sections with very pale tints of different colors and just add a little bit of color on top. And I think that would look really, really cool. You might have a little bit of a look like those old black and white photos that they then tinted with markers or with paints. I think it would kind of look like that. That'd be kind of a fun technique. So I might have to do that soon. I think that would be really interesting. So I finished up all of the characters and then I went on to this banner, and just to keep it simple, I did some darker shade at the bottom of the banner and near the pole, and then kind of faded it out from there. And I did just a little bit of shading on that pole so that it was finished. So I'm going to work on the background, and I'm taping it down to my hardboard here so that I can do a lot of painting. But I realized before I paint the background, I need to determine where each of these images will be in the scene so that I know how to paint the ground. So I use 3 of the dies that coordinate with the stamp set. But I didn't use the die for the bear with the banner because the die wasn't matching up completely. I think when I mounted the stamp to my MISTI tool, it moved the banner a little bit so that the die itself doesn't match up, but I kind of figured that that was user error on my part. So I just used some scissors and trimmed out that image the best I could, just cutting out around the edges and fussy cutting everything. So I positioned all of those images on the background piece where I thought roughly where they would be, and I determined where I wanted the ground to be. Put a little tick mark with a pencil on the tape on the side, and then used a ruler to draw in that horizon line. I've wet the entire piece of watercolor paper. By the way, this is that same Arches cold press watercolor paper. I wet that down so that I have a nice wet surface to work on, and then I started dropping in some of this color, and I'm bringing it in mostly at full strength because I really want the color to wick away from those edges and have a lot of contrast. I wasn't sure how I felt about this sky background at first, but I really love how it turned out. So it was one of those moments for me when I was like, oh yeah, trust the watercolor. Trust the watercolor, it will come through. As long as you're kind of thinking to keep some white space free so that it looks like clouds, I think skies are so fun to paint, and they're almost foolproof. I can't say they're completely foolproof because I've painted some really bad skies in the past, so I can't say that they're completely foolproof, but just remember to keep some white space in your sky and it will probably turn out beautiful. So I just painted like a dark blue at the bottom, and to me right now this looks like an ocean scene. I didn't even think that it would with all of the blue, but it totally looks like an ocean scene. So I'm going to bring in those images once more and kind of put them in the places where I want them. And then I'm going to paint in some slightly darker areas for shadows underneath each of these. And still looks like ocean to me, but that's okay. The whole entire card is blue. It'll make a little more sense once things are put together. So I placed all those images back on the card front or on this background, and I placed it in my MISTI tool and then stamped some additional images from the stamp set. These were images that were a little bit too small to cut out on their own, and so I thought it would be best to have them on the actual background. So I've got 3 little music notes and also like some juggling balls for above the penguin. So I stamped those images in the same black ink, and then I brought in some white gouache. This is the one area of the card where I veered away from just that one watercolor paint, and that's because I just wasn't thinking ahead, and if I would have been thinking ahead, I would have figured out the spacing of these animals before painting the background. Stamped those images and then used a bit of liquid masking fluid over these so that I could preserve the white color underneath, but I wasn't thinking that far ahead, and so I did end up having to use a little bit of an opaque white paint just to get some of the brightness back in those images. So I prepped my card base out of some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. This is the 110-pound version. I just scored that at 5.5 to create a side folding card. Then I put some foam tape on the back of my painted background piece. And the last thing to do is put some foam tape on the back of all of these really cute images and place them onto the card. So I'm making sure I have them in the right spot, right above those shadow spots that I added earlier. And I'm also being very conscious of where that penguin is beneath the balls. I want to make sure that they're in the right position. And that pretty much finishes the card for today. I thought this challenge was a really interesting take on it. I mean, it was still a challenge, but I had a lot of fun and I found it really freeing to only use one color of paint. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this challenge. And if you decide to take the challenge, tag me on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever, because I really want to see your take on this particular challenge. I think it could be really, really fun. On screen right now are 2 other watercolor videos for you to check out. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and share it with a friend if you think they would enjoy it too. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.